Here are Grandma's 42 Great Depression baking hacks to survive hard times. Tomato soup cake. During lean years back in the Great Depression, Grandma knew desserts had to stretch what little was on hand. Tomato soup cake came from that mindset. A can of soup replaced milk, butter, and eggs all at once, adding moisture and gentle spice. You mix it right into the batter with flour, sugar, and baking soda, then bake as usual. The soup's acidity helps the cake rise while keeping it tender. It doesn't taste like tomatoes. It tastes like making do and making it sweet anyway. Rice pudding base with leftover rice. Did you know that rice pudding became popular because nothing cooked was ever thrown away during hard times? Leftover rice, already softened from cooking, made the perfect base for a filling dessert. You simmer it slowly with milk, sugar, and spices until thick and creamy. The starch released from the rice does the thickening without eggs. This approach turned yesterday's meal into today's comfort. It filled bellies cheaply and proved that leftovers, when treated right, could feel brand new. 3-ingredient peanut butter cookies. When cupboards were thin, simple recipes kept spirits up. Peanut butter cookies needed only peanut butter, sugar, and an egg. You stir, roll, press with a fork, and bake. The natural oils in the peanut butter provide fat, structure, and flavor all at once. Sugar adds crisp edges while the egg binds everything together. These cookies weren't fancy, but they were filling and rich. In tough times, fewer ingredients meant fewer worries and quicker comfort from a hot oven. Grease pans with lard or drippings. Baking grease didn't come from a store shelf back then. According to Grandma, saved bacon drippings and lard were too valuable to waste and perfect for greasing pans. You rub a thin layer directly onto the pan with a cloth or paper, coating every corner. The fat prevents sticking and adds subtle flavor. Nothing burned, nothing wasted. Using drippings meant one less thing to buy and reminded bakers that cooking fats had more than one job in the kitchen. Prune or date fruit filler. Dried fruits like prunes and dates replaced sugar and fresh produce when those were scarce. Chopped finely or simmered into a paste, they added moisture, sweetness, and body to cakes and breads. You mix them straight into batter or swirl them through dough. Their natural sugars caramelize gently in the oven, keeping baked goods soft longer. This trick came from necessity, not trends. When times were tight, fruit fillers stretched recipes and turned humble loaves into satisfying treats. Water as the pie base for water pie. During the Great Depression, water pie proved that dessert didn't require abundance, just ingenuity. When milk and eggs were scarce, bakers used water, sugar, flour, and butter to build a custard-like filling. You pour water straight into the crust, add the dry ingredients, dot with fat, and bake until set. The sugar thickens as it cooks, creating a simple, sliceable pie. It tastes plain, but comforting. Water pie wasn't fancy, but it filled plates when hope mattered more than luxury. Mayonnaise as a 2-in-1 with egg and fat. Mayonnaise earned its place in baking because it already combines oil and eggs in perfect balance. Folding a spoonful into cake batter adds moisture and richness without extra ingredients. The oil keeps crumbs tender, while the egg content provides structure. You don't taste mayo at all once baked. This shortcut reduced waste and shopping during hard times. It also made cakes more forgiving when measurements weren't exact. One jar quietly replaced 2 essentials, stretching pantry staples without sacrificing texture or rise. Soured milk for buttermilk. Buttermilk wasn't always easy to come by, but soured milk stood in beautifully. Fresh milk left to turn slightly acidic or encouraged with a splash of vinegar gave bakers the tang needed for proper rise. That acidity reacts with baking soda, creating lift and tenderness in breads and cakes. This method saved money and prevented waste. Nothing was tossed just because it aged. Soured milk reminded cooks that timing could turn a problem into an ingredient that worked even better than the original. Mock pecan pie with oats. When nuts were too costly, oats stepped in. Toasted oats mimicked the texture and richness of chopped pecans surprisingly well. According to Grandma, the trick was letting the filling cook slowly so the oats soaked up syrup and butter fully. You bake it just like a pecan pie, and most folks never noticed the difference. Oats were cheap, filling, and always on hand. This pie wasn't about fooling anyone. It was about delivering comfort when real pecans were out of reach. Homemade sourdough starter. A sourdough starter meant never needing store-bought yeast again. Flour and water, fed regularly, captured wild yeast from the air. The starter strengthened over time, leavening bread while adding flavor and keeping loaves fresh longer. Families guarded their starters like heirlooms because they represented independence. In hard times, sourdough meant reliable bread no matter what shortages came. It required patience, not money. Once alive, it gave back every day, turning simple flour into food that carried households through lean years. Lard or drippings for butter substitute. When butter was scarce, saved lard and drippings stepped in without complaint. Home bakers scooped from a coffee can kept near the stove, using it measure for measure in pies, biscuits, and cakes. The fat provided richness and tenderness, just like butter would. Its stable structure handled heat well and produced flaky crusts. Nothing went to waste in those kitchens. Using drippings turned yesterday's supper into today's baking fat, stretching resources while keeping food filling, flavorful, and dependable through hard times. Mock apple pie with Ritz crackers. Mock apple pie was born when fresh fruit wasn't available or affordable. Crushed Ritz crackers simmered with sugar, cinnamon, and lemon juice took on the texture and flavor of cooked apples. You pour the mixture into a crust and bake it just like the real thing. Crackers absorb liquid and soften, mimicking sliced fruit remarkably well. This clever swap fooled plenty of taste buds. More importantly, it let families enjoy a familiar dessert even when apples were out of season or out of reach. Oatmeal extender. Oatmeal quietly stretched countless baking recipes when flour, sugar, or eggs ran low. Finely ground or cooked soft, oats blended into batters and doughs to add bulk and nutrition. You mix them into breads, muffins, or cookies without much fuss. Oats hold moisture well and help fill stomachs longer. They were affordable, shelf-stable, and versatile. Adding oatmeal turned small portions into satisfying food, helping families make meals and treats last longer without noticeably changing texture or flavor. Clean snow ice cream base. Fresh snow became dessert when nothing else was around. Clean, freshly fallen snow was scooped into a bowl, then mixed quickly with milk, sugar, and a splash of vanilla. You had to work fast before it melted. Snow provided the chill while simple pantry items supplied flavor. It wasn't about extravagance. It was about turning what nature offered into something joyful. On lean winter days, snow ice cream was proof that comfort could come from almost nothing. Simple, powdered sugar glaze. A basic powdered sugar glaze added polish when ingredients were limited. Sugar mixed with a little water or milk created a smooth drizzle for cakes, breads, and buns. You stir slowly until it pours easily, then spoon it over cooled, baked goods. As it sets, it forms a thin, sweet coating that adds moisture and appeal. This glaze used almost no resources, but made humble baking feel special. A small finishing touch went a long way during difficult times. Old candy syrup. Leftover hard candies never went to waste in frugal kitchens. Peppermints, rock candy, or any sugar candy were melted slowly with a little water to create a pourable syrup. You simmer gently until smooth, stirring so it doesn't scorch. The dissolved sugar thickens naturally as it cools, turning scraps into a sweet topping for pancakes or biscuits. Each batch carried its own flavor depending on what candy was saved. It was a clever way to stretch treats and add sweetness without buying syrup. Coffee for color and moisture. Coffee played a quiet but important role in baking when extras were scarce. Replacing some of the liquid in cakes with brewed coffee deepened color and added moisture. You don't taste coffee strongly. Instead, it enriches chocolate and spice flavors while keeping crumbs tender. Coffee's slight bitterness balanced sweetness, making simple desserts taste richer. Using what was already brewed, saved ingredients and gave baked goods a darker, fuller look, helping homemade treats feel more indulgent than their humble origins suggested. Cornstarch as egg substitute. During the Depression era, eggs were often too costly or simply unavailable. Cornstarch stepped in as a reliable binder. Mixed with water, it thickened batters and helped hold cakes and cookies together. You whisk it smooth before adding 2 dry ingredients. While it didn't provide lift, it added structure and softness where eggs were missing. This substitution kept baking possible when protein was scarce. Cornstarch helped families continue familiar recipes despite shortages, proving flexibility mattered more than perfection. Chocolate gravy. Chocolate gravy wasn't a luxury. It was a way to turn flour, cocoa, sugar, and milk into something filling and comforting. You cook it slowly, stirring until thick, then pour it warm over biscuits. Flour provides body, while cocoa delivers flavor. Sweet but simple, it stretched small amounts of chocolate into a meal. This dish filled plates quickly and cheaply, offering warmth and energy. It became a favorite because it used pantry staples to create something deeply satisfying. Canned fruit delight. Home canned fruit gave families dessert options year-round. Peaches, pears, or berries preserved in jars were turned into simple delights by draining and warming them gently with their own syrup. Sometimes a little flour or cornstarch thickened the juice. These fruits topped bread, cakes, or biscuits without extra sugar. Home canning allowed flavors of summer to last through hard winters. It saved money, prevented waste, and brought a touch of brightness to tables when fresh fruit was impossible to find. Honey or syrup swap for sugar. Can you believe honey is considered a luxury now when it was once far more affordable back then? During the Great Depression, honey often cost just a few cents a pound, especially for families who kept hives or bought locally. When sugar ran short, honey or syrup stepped in. You'd reduce the liquid slightly and swap part of the sugar measure with honey. These natural sweeteners added moisture and depth. It was a practical adjustment that stretched sweetness and kept baking possible when sugar was scarce. Cornstarch thickener. Cornstarch earned its place as a kitchen staple because it could thicken almost anything with just a spoonful. Mixed with cold water first, then stirred into hot liquids, it quickly tightened sauces, fillings, and gravies. No eggs, cream, or extra flour needed. Cornstarch produced a smooth texture and clear finish, making it ideal for pies and puddings. It was cheap, shelf-stable, and powerful. In hard times, a small box could stretch dozens of meals by turning thin liquids into filling dishes. Soup water liquid, for broth or bread. Nothing flavorful was ever poured down the drain. After boiling vegetables or meat, the leftover soup water became broth or even bread liquid. You'd strain it, let it cool, and use it in soups, gravies, or dough instead of plain water. The liquid already carried salt, starch, and nutrients. Using it added flavor without extra ingredients. This habit reduced waste and deepened taste, showing how careful cooks pulled value from every pot, even after the main meal was finished. Saltine base for pie crust. Pie crust didn't always start with flour. Grandma would crush saltines, mix them with a little fat and sugar, then press the crumbs into a pan. The crackers baked up crisp and sturdy, holding fillings just as well as traditional crusts. Saltines were cheap, long-lasting, and always available. Their mild salt balanced sweet fillings perfectly. This crust wasn't second best. It was a smart alternative that proved good pies didn't depend on fancy ingredients, just resourceful hands. Wacky cake leavener, used in vinegar and baking soda. Wacky cake became popular during the Depression era because it needed no eggs, milk, or butter. Vinegar and baking soda did the lifting instead. You mixed the dry ingredients, added liquid, then stirred in vinegar at the end. The reaction created bubbles that raised the cake. The vinegar flavor baked off completely. This method kept cakes light and tender using pantry basics. It showed that chemistry, not excess, could produce something sweet and satisfying even when traditional baking supplies was not available. Recycled jars for storage. Glass jars were never thrown away in hard times. Once emptied, they were washed, dried, and reused for flour, sugar, dried fruit, or leftovers. Tight lids kept pests out and ingredients fresh longer. Clear glass also let cooks see exactly what they had on hand without wasting anything. Jars stacked neatly on shelves and doubled as measuring guides. Reusing containers saved money and reduced waste. In kitchens that counted every cent, a sturdy jar was as valuable as any tool. Interchangeable leaveners with soda or powder. Baking stayed flexible because cooks understood how leaveners worked. Baking soda needed acid to activate, while baking powder already contained it. When one ran out, recipes were adjusted instead of abandoned. Vinegar, sour milk, or molasses activated soda easily. Knowing these swaps kept bread and cakes rising even during shortages. This knowledge came from necessity, not textbooks. It allowed families to bake consistently despite limited supplies and reminded everyone that understanding ingredients mattered more than strictly following recipes. Vinegar for lemon tartness. When citrus was unavailable, vinegar supplied the tang needed for pies. Vinegar pie used sugar, flour, butter, and vinegar to mimic lemon's sharpness. The acidity balanced sweetness and helped set the filling. Once baked, the flavor mellowed into something surprisingly pleasant. Vinegar was cheap, shelf-stable, and always present. This pie came from creativity, not desperation. It showed that tartness didn't require fruit, just careful balance and trust in simple chemistry. Stale bread pudding. Stale bread wasn't a problem. Rather, it was the beginning of dessert. Cubes of old bread soaked up milk, eggs, and sugar, transforming into a soft, filling pudding once baked. Spices or dried fruit were added when available. Bread pudding stretched small portions into something satisfying and warm. Using bread at its end of life reduced waste and filled bellies. This dish thrived because it adapted to whatever was on hand, turning yesterday's scraps into today's comfort. Shortening for softer crumb. Shortening became popular because it was inexpensive, shelf-stable, and dependable. Unlike butter, it didn't melt too quickly or spoil easily. In cakes and biscuits, shortening coated flour evenly, limiting gluten formation and producing a softer crumb. Bakers used it when butter was scarce or saved for special uses. The results were tender and consistent. Shortening helped maintain baking quality during uncertain times, proving that texture and comfort could still be achieved with practical substitutes. Green tomato pie. When ripe fruit was scarce, green tomatoes stepped in. Sliced thin and mixed with sugar, cinnamon, and a little vinegar or lemon, they mimicked apple filling remarkably well. Baked inside a simple crust, the tomatoes softened and absorbed sweetness, losing their vegetal bite. The vinegar added brightness and balance. This pie came from thrift and creativity, not novelty. It let gardens provide dessert even before harvest was ready, proving early produce still had value when treated with care. Self-rising flour premix. Making self-rising flour at home saved money and shelf space. Cook simply blended flour with baking powder and salt in advance, keeping it ready for biscuits, pancakes, and quick breads. This shortcut reduced measuring steps and avoided buying specialty flour. Pre-mixing ensured consistent rise and dependable results, even when recipes changed week to week. During lean times, having a reliable flour blend meant faster baking and fewer mistakes. It was preparation that paid off whenever the oven was fired up. Sugar cream pie. Who's your pie? Sugar cream pie relied on pantry basics instead of eggs or fruit. Sugar, flour, milk, and butter cooked into a smooth custard that baked into a rich, comforting filling. The flour thickened the milk gently, while sugar provided structure as it caramelized slightly. This pie emerged from simplicity and necessity. It wasn't flashy, but it was filling and dependable. Families leaned on it because it delivered warmth and sweetness without requiring scarce or expensive ingredients. Flour sack kitchen towels. Flour sacks were never thrown away back in Grandma's day. Once emptied, the cloth was washed and repurposed into kitchen towels, napkins, or even aprons. The fabric was durable, absorbent, and soft after a few washes. Using sacks reduced the need to buy linens and kept everything working twice as hard. Printed sacks even added color to modest kitchens. This practice reflected a mindset of reuse and respect for materials, where nothing useful was wasted and practicality guided every choice. Potato stretcher, added to flour. Grated or mashed potatoes stretched flour when grain supplies were tight. Mixed into bread dough, potatoes added moisture, bulk, and softness while reducing the amount of flour needed. The starch helped hold structure and kept loaves fresh longer. Potatoes were affordable and filling, making them ideal extenders. This trick allowed bakers to produce more bread from less flour without sacrificing quality. It was a smart, filling solution born from necessity and thoughtful use of available food. Molasses sweetener. Molasses became a trusted sweetener when refined sugar was expensive or unavailable. Thick, dark, and rich, it added sweetness along with minerals and depth of flavor. Bakers used it in breads, cakes, and cookies, often reducing other sugars to balance taste. Molasses also helped retain moisture, keeping baked goods soft longer. A little went a long way. It wasn't just a substitute. It was a staple that brought strength, color, and hearty flavor to baking during hard times. Reuse the coffee grounds or stale coffee. Coffee was used twice, sometimes more. Leftover brewed coffee replaced water or milk in cakes and quick breads, adding color and moisture without waste. Stale coffee deepened chocolate flavors and gave baked goods a richer appearance. Even spent grounds found second life in the garden or for scrubbing pots. Nothing flavorful was discarded. Reusing coffee squeezed value from every cup, proving that resourcefulness turned ordinary habits into quiet savings throughout the kitchen. Pie crust scrap cookies. Leftover pie crust dough never hit the trash. Scraps were gathered, re-rolled lightly, then cut into small shapes. A sprinkle of sugar or cinnamon turned them into simple cookies baked alongside the pie. The fat already in the dough ensured crisp edges and tender centers. These treats satisfied sweet cravings without extra ingredients. Turning scraps into cookies stretched every batch and rewarded patience. It was a practical habit that added comfort without cost. Raisin filler for poor man's cake. Poor man's cake depended on raisins for sweetness and body instead of eggs or butter. Boiled with water and spices, raisins softened and released natural sugars into the batter. According to Grandma, that boiling step made all the difference, creating moisture where fat was missing. The cake baked dense but satisfying, filling plates cheaply. Raisins were affordable, shelf-stable, and dependable. This filler transformed a simple flour mixture into a dessert that carried families through lean days. Mix-in-the-pan method. The mix-in-the-pan method cut dishes and waste to a minimum. Dry ingredients were stirred right in the baking pan, then liquid was poured on top and mixed gently with a fork. No bowls, no extra cleanup. This approach saved water, soap, and time, all valuable during lean years. Ingredients blended just enough to bake evenly without fuss. It wasn't about perfection. It was about efficiency, practicality, and getting something warm into the oven with as little effort and waste as possible. Jam or jelly cake. Jam and jelly cakes replaced costly fresh or canned fruit when those weren't available. A generous scoop of homemade jam was stirred directly into simple cake batter, adding sweetness, moisture, and fruit flavor all at once. The natural pectin helped thicken and soften the crumb as it baked. Different jams meant different cakes without extra expense. This approach turned preserved fruit into something new and satisfying, allowing bakers to stretch summer canning well into winter desserts. Icebox cookies. Did you know that icebox cookies became popular because dough could be made once and baked over many days? Families mixed a large batch, shaped it into logs, and stored it cold. When treats were needed, slices were cut and baked fresh. Chilling firmed the fat, helping cookies hold shape and bake evenly. This method saved fuel and effort by spacing out baking. Icebox cookies offered flexibility, freshness, and control when ingredients and oven time had to be carefully managed. For more contents like this, click here to subscribe.